All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing some digging, not with shovels, but through the layers of history itself. We're going deep beneath one of Europe's most iconic landmarks to uncover a story that was, well, literally buried. A history that really challenges everything we thought we knew about the city of Vienna.
You know, when you think of Vienna, or if you've ever been there, St. Stephen's Cathedral is probably what comes to mind. It's this magnificent symbol, right? A Gothic masterpiece that's been the heart of the city for centuries. It just feels permanent, orderly, like a monument to a very clear and dignified past. But here's the twist. Excavations in the 20th century revealed that this picture-perfect landmark is sitting on top of something completely different, something chaotic, much, much older, and honestly, deeply mysterious. Okay, so let's really get into this. So the huge problem the excavators ran into was this. The physical evidence, what they were actually pulling out of the ground, just completely contradicts the nice, clean, official history of the cathedral. The story the stones were telling just didn't match the story in the books at all. And that's really the heart of it, this total clash between two different stories. On one hand, you've got the neat version from the history books, a grand cathedral rising up from a simple medieval church. But on the other hand, you have the messy, confusing reality from the ground itself, a story of collapse, chaos, and a whole forgotten world of jumbled ruins. So, let's basically become historical detectives here. We're going to look at the evidence piece by piece, treating every baffling discovery as a new clue. We're peeling back the layers of Vienna, and trust me, each one is more shocking than the last. Okay, so the first and most obvious clue was that the cathedral's foundations are just a complete architectural puzzle. It's almost like the building wasn't built from scratch, but was forced to work around something that was already there. What this tells us is that the builders weren't starting with a clean slate. It's like they found the ghosts of older buildings, pointing in a totally different direction. But instead of clearing it all away, they seem to have just built right on top of the mess. And that created this jumbled, misaligned base that makes absolutely no sense for such a precise Gothic building. The next clue the excavators found was even weirder, and it was hidden in Vienna's oldest burial zone. Now, the city has seen its share of plagues, so you'd expect to find mass graves. But this was something else entirely. So this evidence points to something way more violent than a disease outbreak. We're talking about skeletons that weren't just buried, they were crushed, scattered, and trapped in rubble, almost like the ground itself was violently shattered by some kind of catastrophe that has been completely wiped from the history books. And then things get really strange. Deep below the church, they found something that has no business being at a sacred site. This was supposed to be the spiritual heart of the city, but the ground told a story of fire and industry. And we're not just talking about a little bit of debris. The sheer amount of industrial waste suggests this was a major hub of activity long before it became a place of worship. So why was there massive-scale metalworking happening right on this spot? It really suggests the site was important for reasons that had nothing to do with Christianity. But you know, the deepest layers held the most shocking clue of them all. They found stonework that just seemed impossibly advanced, hinting at a totally forgotten chapter of Vienna's past. What the teams found next was just astounding. It looked like megalithic foundations. We're talking huge, precisely cut stones, interlocked without any mortar. The scale of it all seemed way beyond what early medieval or even Roman builders in Vienna could do. So you have to ask yourself, who in this region's distant past had the technology to build something like this? These discoveries just blew the whole story wide open. They suggest the cathedral wasn't built on a little church, but on the leftovers of a much older, much more sophisticated city, a kind of proto-Vienna that we never even knew existed. So, what's the fallout from all these clues? Well, these discoveries didn't just add a few new details to the story, they forced a complete and total rewrite of Vienna's origins, making historians question the city's very identity and wonder why the real story was ever lost. That simple, clean timeline of the city's growth, it got completely thrown out the window. What everyone thought was a quiet period was actually a time of complex activity, then some mysterious disaster, and then a medieval city rising, not from nothing, but literally on top of the ruins. It makes you wonder, right? Was this history just forgotten, or was it intentionally paved over? There's actually a perfect word for this: A palimpsest. Like an old manuscript where someone erased the original writing to write something new, but you can still see the faint traces of the old text underneath? Vienna, it turns out, is an architectural palimpsest.
So, what this really means is that Vienna had to face a whole new self-image. It's not a city that breaks with its past, it's a city that's quite literally built on its past. Its evolution wasn't about some grand plan. It was about a really practical and probably opportunistic reuse of a history it likely didn't even understand.
At the end of the day, these excavations left us with a pretty profound idea about the very ground we all walk on. This story isn't really just about Vienna, it's about the hidden layers that exist beneath all of our cities.
So St. Stephen's stands today not just as a monument to faith, but also is a kind of seal placed over a turbulent and forgotten past. It's a story of collapse, of lost civilizations, and the incredible act of building a new world right on the bones of an old one.
And that really leaves us with one final thought. If a place as famous as St. Stephen's can hide such incredible secrets, what forgotten stories does the ground beneath our own feet tell? Maybe every city, every town, has a hidden history, just waiting right below the surface for someone to find it.